Welcome to episode 139 of Silver Lining for Learning. Is it time to lead or about time we led? Learning experience design and personalized learning. So we have with us today Dr. Mark Milliron. He was in San Diego. He's an award-winning author, speaker, leader, consultant. Right now, he's president and CEO of National University, one of the largest nonprofits in the country. I had a chance to visit the place. Apparently, they've sold that facility at Torrey Pines, but it's a wonderful university to work for. I've known it. My colleagues worked there for a long time. And they're helping the non-traditional learner, in particular those in the workplace, those in the military, and those just find they need some reskilling and upskilling and get a master's degree or something and get back into the workforce. So Mark is not only the president currently of National University, he was a former Western Governors University chancellor, senior vice president. At one point, he was an executive dean. He's probably had every role possible at Western Governors. I think he was on the trustees as well. He's also part of the Gates Foundation as a deputy director and the CEO and founder of, and I cannot say this name right, and I put my notes aside, Savatus. Thank you, Mark. When you can't find them in schools, universities, community colleges, associations, foundations, corporations, you'll find them in government agencies. So he's pretty much done it all. Kim Round is with us from Deerfield, New Hampshire, a small community of 4,000 or 5,000 people north of Boston. She's an associate dean for the School of Education at Western Governors University and spends her time constantly thinking about learner-centered, learner-empowered learning and fostering empathy-based leadership and ways to empower learners, adult learners in particular. For a time, she was on the faculty of Brandeis and Harvard University Extension. So welcome, Kim. Welcome, Mark. It's great to have you both with us today. And I'm going to start us off with two questions related to the topic of this show, learning experience design. So first off, and I'll start with Mark on this and Kim go after Mark. Why is it time for learning experience designers, and what exactly is a learning experience designer? Can you give us some information on that?
Yeah, I think we're in an interesting moment, especially post-pandemic. After we're in this moment in the world of higher education where we are wrestling with the kind of post-traumatic, and it is trauma, post-traumatic work after a devastating disease, and also dealing with really daunting demography, where people are realizing, hey, the traditional model of education was built for a specific set of students, especially students who are coming, usually privileged students coming directly from high school. The world of higher education is a lot more diverse and a lot more rowdy now than ever before. And that model probably doesn't fit with the folks that we're talking about right now. And especially post-pandemic, as people were really exposed to all the possibilities with learning and the realization that, hey, I can combine this with, while I'm working, I can combine this with my really complicated life. And it's really brought an imperative to to revision what education would look like. And the idea of learning experience design is really born out of this realization after about the last 10 years of work around college completion. When all the foundations, government agencies, and innovators out there tried to help more students complete the world of higher ed. And what they basically found is the current model was not designed for them. And actually trying to get them to complete this model is a little bit of insanity. And in fact, the number one set of people, and the number one reason people do not complete higher ed is not academic insufficiencies, it's because life happens. It's everything from, hey, my spouse moved, to housing insecurity, food insecurity, transportation challenges, my work-life balance, whatever that might be. And that realization kind of made everyone take a deep breath and say, oh, this isn't just about redesigning courses or instructional design. It's actually about the entire experience. And one of the things we say all the time is people get reductionistic about colleges. They kind of almost like treat colleges like it's a collection of classes. Right. And one of the things we like to say, Kim and I both will say that, college is not a collection of classes. It's a family of experiences that happen to include classes. Those experiences include peer interactions, faculty interactions, internships, externships, co-curricular orientation, advising, all those kinds of things make up that experience. And one of the things we say is, let's open the aperture. and let's use design thinking to actually, instead of just redesign instructional experiences, the classroom, let's actually get intentional about designing that family of experiences. Let's curate and create the family of experiences that a student will go through to make sure they can make the most of that journey, not just check the boxes on a set of classes, that they actually can kind of suck the marrow out of that experience, right? Get everything they possibly can get in that process. And so we make the case, Kim and I both make the case that the time for learning experience design is now. And let's take the good work we've really kind of done with decades of work in instructional design, open that aperture and really think broadly about how can we combine great data, good design thinking, really strong, kind of demographic moment, and let's go after it. And let's think about learning experience design in a broader way. And the beginning, and I'll turn it over to Kim right now, but the idea of doing a program around this was, you can wax poetic about it all day long, but we have to start advancing the discipline of learning experience design. And part of that is, okay, let's build a program around this. And we even had a fight internally at WGU because just the name, well, people don't even know what learning experience. We can't offer a program. They know instructional design. So it was fascinating to see, as this kind of stuff starts, you really have to kind of push through some barriers. And Kim, I'll turn it to you on this one. This was a journey because we had to shepherd this from that idea, even through the curriculum development process, even in a place like WGU.
It was. And, when we're building programs, we're trying to be very future forward. We're focused on next generation teaching, learning, and leading. And so when we're thinking about that space, it had to lean forward. And one of the things that I love that you say a lot, Mark, is empathy into action. And to me, this program, Master of Science in Learning Experience Design and Educational Technology, really is helping designers move from that place of empathy and starting with empathy for the learner and move it into action. And that's how we walk everyone through. It's interesting. We're up to 1,100 students now. It's exciting, and it's really been something that is resonating with people. We also wanted to take a couple of different pathways through it, where there was a pathway that focuses in on K-12 experiences, and then a pathway that really focuses in on the adult experiences. And almost as an afterthought, we thought, gee, maybe someone's going to want both. And that's actually one of the pathways that we have a strong amount of students in. So anyway,
by the way, the adult learning one is not just higher ed, it is workforce training. It is like people who are the heads of learning and development for corporations. And it is an ecumenical program. It is K-12, formal higher ed, and workforce development. And Kim really anchored that conceptualization from the very beginning and said, hey, let's create a design lab, and then let's let the student choose their context. They can choose K-12, they can choose higher ed, they can choose workforce, or they can mix. And I just love that, Kim, the whole idea of giving students choices, right?
Well, and not only are we talking the talk, we're walking the walk, right? Because if somebody's coming to learn about learning experience design, they need to experience it. They need to experience a good design themselves. So anyway, we worked on it for a while. Just launched last July, and as I say, we're already up to a good many students. We also, because we're a competency-based model, we've had some learners come through that were really ready to accelerate through the program because of their background. So we actually have 24 grads now after 7 months of being up and running. But these are individuals that came in with a very strong work background. They also were coming in with a capstone project ready to go. So we were able to meet their need to accelerate, and that's exciting because we're starting to hear about some of the jobs they're getting.
And we're keeping our connection together because National University, where I am now, is in our mission statement is the commitment to world-class student experience design. I love it, and they had me at student experience design, and it was starting time to have the conversation. So Kurt, it's been fun.
So when I chatted with you a few weeks ago, I was thinking you were getting ramped up for next July or this coming July. You've already started the program and have hundreds of people involved, and some graduated already. So
Yeah.
it's a different story, maybe a little different question, but still kind of interested in whether you could describe, and you've kind of already done this, your thoughts and ideas that went into the Masters of Science and Learning Experience Design and Educational Technology. Maybe just a little self promo, since we're on, we are live, we're recording this. What kind of student would be, the program be advertising to, or think would be the ideal types of students that would enter such a program? Do you have any sense of that? And how long did it take you to design this master's program? Was it a decade in the works, a year, 2 years?
It was about 18 months, Kurt, that we spent. But of course, I've been in this field for a while and seeing the pivot from instructional design to learning experience design. But really, when we were thinking about, we were thinking about personas. We were thinking about the types of learners that would navigate it. We applied learning experience design to the design of the program. And what we saw was that the top 10 employers for learning experience design spanned government and military and corporate spaces, healthcare, as well as K-12. So in terms of our personas, we were thinking that there may be teachers who wanted to pivot out of the classroom and spend more time in a design space. We thought about people that might be on that chief learning officer track in a corporate or workforce development environment, even the learning development and training orgs as part of big consultancies. So,
and then the pandemic hit. Everybody wanted a learning designer. Everybody wanted a conversation around. It was just amazing how the timing of that, and Kim and company had just done such good work in the conceptualization of this, and we really just pushed to get this thing out, and it hit like wildfire. It was probably one of the most successful program launches ever at Western Governors.
Yeah, it really was exciting for the team to see the interest in it. And, in the field, I know I'm speaking to the choir. Those of us in the design space, we moved from being, with the pandemic, it really accelerated our visibility and importance to organizations as people started to make that pivot to the future of work and learning. So anyway, it's an exciting space to be. We're seeing some very passionate students coming through and that really want to be part of building the next generation of teaching and leading and learning.
Yeah, so students listening to this program later on or watching it, there are jobs in this field, and there are many jobs and many opportunities. So talk to Kim, write an email to Mark, you can find out about them. Chris is going to jump in here. Chris?
Well, I did wear a nice tie today with hearts on it. Maybe not so easy to see. And some of that is just pre-Valentine's Day, but some of that is because there's a couple things I love about this initiative. One of them is just the emphasis on learning. We spent decades with the emphasis on curriculum and didn't get much of anywhere. We spent decades with the emphasis on instruction and didn't get much of anywhere. And then finally we thought, well, maybe we should focus on learning, and we've gotten somewhere. What an insight. And you're right that there's a lot of resistance still to thinking in this way. There's a debate in the instructional design community about a field called learning engineering, which is really engineering learning. I co-edited a book on this in 2019. A really excellent handbook on this came out in the last year, the Learning Engineering Toolkit. But the instructional designer said, well, this is just repackaging instructional design. And I'm kind of notorious for the comment I made in response, which is I said, learning engineering is about things that need to be learned but can't be taught. And there was this long dead silence. But of course, creativity, inquiry, leadership. These are things that can't be taught, but you can foster their learning, because when you teach them, then they turn into recipes, which is not what they are. But I also applaud this from a different perspective, because as the Associate Director for Research at the National AI Institute on Adult Learning and Online Education, I recognize the opportunity and really the urgency of rethinking adult capacity building in this country across the board, from voc tech schools right up through the 58-year-olds that are doing lifelong learning. And continuing education has made a good start on this, but it's broader than that. And we need to experiment with new kinds of models. And I think programs like yours are preparing people to go out and experiment on those sorts of models. But that said, I think that the challenge is not only in how we help adults learn, but what we focus on in their learning. Because, copy editors now are being fired because of ChatGPT. And those jobs are not coming back. This is, interestingly enough, the white collar equivalent of the robots and the auto assembly line workers. And you don't want to say to somebody that's made their living working with words, well, why don't you go to programming boot camp, and learn Python or something? That's not the right way to think about reskilling. And I think the whole issue of reskilling in the age of generative AI, to ask what's the human side of the partnership that isn't going to be wiped out by advances in AI 2, 3, 4 years down the road, is a challenge for anybody doing adult learning to think about what that's about. So I applaud what you're doing. I think the timing is great. And I'm not surprised that you're incurring resistance, because anytime you come up with something new, everybody wants to say, oh no, that's just a different term for something we've been doing for the last 10 years. Well, not so much.
Chris, it's such a good point. And what's been wonderful is helping build the program with Kim at WGU was a fun process, and watching it launch and having the success right out of the gate. But seeing it in action at national has been amazing. We actually have a vice provost for learning experience design, Jeff Borden, who's absolutely amazing. And we've created this resource of a whole team of designers that are working with all of our faculty in their creation of curriculum with this new experience design at the core. And one of the things we're talking about is how do you wrap next generation technology, including AI, in what we call whole human education, which is the deep understanding of the complexities of our people, especially because we have a lot of and students, right? They're parents and students, they're caregivers and students, they're soldiers and students, they're employees and students. And our theory is that next gen education, like AI and virtual reality and augmented reality and face-to-face, like we need to figure out all those tools and technologies wrapped in whole human education, aimed at value-rich education, where we can figure out how we curate and create the credentials. We talk about credential-rich, connection-rich, and experience-rich, how we help them just optimize their credential pathway attainment, how we optimize the connections where they meet more people, connect with their faculty, connect with people in their profession, and then we help them get the family of experiences along the way. That has just started these wonderful conversations, and it crosses these boundaries that haven't been crossed. Where now we have our curriculum designers talking with our student success people, talking with our career people, talking with people in the field, and it's powerful to see this in action. And so, Kim, I think WGU is going to have a lot of folks coming after that kind of program, because we ourselves are we're hiring designers left and right, because it's going to be a big part of what NU does, especially just exactly what Chris said, that AI plus whole human is going to be a real charge for us in the world ahead. And we have to think about how we make the most of all those tools. Kim, is that something that's coming up already in the program? People are really thinking about things like ChatGPT and that kind of stuff and how they're going to weave that in?
Well, it's interesting. I think WGU as a whole is thinking a lot about ChatGPT and how to weave it in so it's a positive. And and so I'm looking very closely, Chris, at the work your institute is going to be doing to help inform that. To me, it's a little bit about the evolution of the web when that first arrived, and you had professors that didn't want it included in the learning experience, and now we can't necessarily imagine the learning experience without using the web. I think ChatGPT is absolutely in the same place, and it's just about how do we thoughtfully integrate, and how do we make it part of the experience that empowers the learner. I spent some time actually on ChatGPT a few weeks ago, where I was asking, where do you need a human? Where does the human come into play? And asking questions about how can you help a learning experience designer? How can you help a professor in teaching? And it was very interesting to see ChatGPT come back and say, I need a human. I need a human for this aspect of building that experience. So this is what we need to bake into our program, is really elevating these kinds of conversations. It's evolving, as we all know.
There's a really simplistic go-to move with people thinking when you're learning experience design, you're all thinking about optimizing online learning. Like, absolutely no. We're saying here are all the families of tools and technologies and modes and motives, some of which include no online learning. It might just be face-to-face. We're actually innovating in National with this idea of, instead of co-working space, co-learning space. Because what we're finding is a lot of our adult learners actually need a safe place to learn. They need high-speed internet. They actually need childcare. And if you can work with your YMCA, create childcare opportunities, and create a co-learning space, they'll use it, right? It's not for all of them, but a whole bunch of them will use it. And that's a different part of the experience. And by the way, one of the number one things they talk about with why they want that is belonging. They want to see other people like them. They want to connect. So even though they're doing online learning, they still want that personal connection. I think that's powerful. And that's when you start weaving these, curating and then braiding these these tools and technologies and techniques and modes and motives. That's when it's going to get really fun. But we've got to get people who are willing to do the design thinking work, which, kind of begin with empathy, get a theory, try to prototype it, test it, and be honest, what's working and what's not.
Well, Mark, that's question 8 on my list. So thanks for covering that one. It's about the reconceptualization of space and its importance and how it plays out. We have had a show on space, as I mentioned to you when we chatted a few weeks ago, here at Indiana University, in fact. We've had to talk about space a couple of times, so thanks for bringing it back up. I think we need to go to Young next. Young?
Thank you. Like Chris, I really applaud this efforts. I remember many years ago, I used to be on the Disney Junior Education Advisory Board, and I had a chance for them to show me the Imagineers, the designers of Disney space. You look at Disneyland, that's definitely a wonderful learning experience. That's very well designed. They've done a lot of work, and in education we really haven't done that. I think Chris is right. We got to design the learning space. So I got a bunch of questions. I can be occupied by ChatGPT, but I think ChatGPT, we talk too much. There's a lot more to talk about. But really, some of the things I was just wondering about is, first of all, in your master's program, what do you really teach people, right? Because that's a very important question, because you imagine, like Disneyland has teams of people to design space, that's learning space. And in your program, I think Mark's talking about co-learning, co-design space, all those kind of things. The second one is really, I personally actually have some problems with the design thinking, because design thinking does not apply to all discipline, all fields, all areas, right? So I was want to, like Mark and Kim, if you can comment on design thinking. I'm not saying you guys are only doing design thinking. I'm just saying I heard Mark talking about design thinking, and I just get me nervous to say, there are a lot of things that's more intuitive than the design thinking or out of this school. But anyway, go ahead. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Young. Well, I love that you brought up the design thinking piece, because one of the things that we did want to do was prepare our learners to be able to navigate organizations that weren't doing design with a design thinking background. So we actually incorporate and introduce the other more traditional instructional design processes too. So they do learn about ADDIE, they learn about Agile, they learn about all of those, but really within that context of empathy-based design. So I love that you brought that up. And really what they're learning is to be able to transform the learning experience, so that we're not designing just based on what's the content that we're serving up. We are designing based on the user need. And so from that perspective, that's how we ended up using that as the core. And then also too, it's been so informed by gamification and UX and cognitive psychology over the last 20 years that we need to be able to lean on those types of advances as well to build into the program.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that, it's interesting to see the emerging metaphors in the discipline, right? Because I think the reaction to engineering and learning, the learning engineer, people felt, oh, it's too mechanistic. And then now it's all learning design, and people feel like that feels like it's artistic. And truthfully, it's just disciplinary guides for the same principle, which is intentional, thoughtful development of experiences for these students to help them learn well and finish strong and launch effectively into their lives and be interconnected with the learning enterprise for hopefully a long time. And I think we have to be open to the whole family of possibilities to help people do that more effectively. I think to me, the two most important things around it are, one is we're beginning with a much deeper, richer, better understanding of who our students are and their life experiences, and not just assuming they're a certain kind. And that doesn't mean, by the way, that we don't care about rigor. It doesn't mean we don't care about quality. And because there are some people who the mistake that deep care and empathy for our students with the fact that we're going to try to make a country club. It's not what we're doing. We're actually the understanding of who those students are is going to help us intentionally and carefully design experiences that take that student from where they are and get them to where they need to go. And as Chris said, that might not be teaching, right? That actually might be a deep experience with other students. There might be a real life kind of deep dive into coding or whatever it's going to be. Like, what are the things that are going to help the person master that content, whatever that's going to look like? And we should be open to all of it. So that is the first thing. The second thing is this deep commitment to making sure we know that they're learning, which means we're going to really look at data. We're going to understand and try to find the indications that people are making progress, and then try to get that data back to the student, back to the teacher, back to whoever the learning coordinator, whatever it is, so we can help guide that process. And that commitment to data helps us design, helps us engineer, helps us build, whatever it's going to be. It also helps that learner be far more empowered, where they can now, instead of being infantilized in the learning experience, they actually are empowered and they now can drive their own learning. And what's going to be most powerful around this is when that learner begins to design their own learning. They know this is the way I think I can master content most effectively, and they really begin to build that professional learning network, and they start pulling that stuff together. But I do think that commitment to deep understanding of people and the commitment to data have to be their hand. It's almost like a yin yang.
Chris?
One of the benefits for me of being involved with this National AI Institute has been getting to know my colleague Ruth Canfer, who is a professor in the psychology department at Georgia Tech, whose specialty is adult workplace learning. And she actually was the expert on the National Academy of Sciences committee that wrote How People Learn Too, and brought in her expertise on adult learning. And in listening to Ruth and working with her, one of the things she says is that you would never bring together a first grader, a seventh grader, and a 12th grader and use a one-size-fits-all pedagogy. But we bring together a 24-year-old, a 42-year-old, and a 58-year-old, and we use a one-size-fits-all andragogy. And that does not work. The personalization for adults is different than personalization for children, but it's no less of an issue. And I think a challenge for all of us as we develop this adult learning is that just as the high school student can be a resource for the middle school student, who can be a resource for the young student, but the young student motivationally can be a resource for the older students who have become burned out and cynical through the process of schooling. So too can we see the same kind of things happening with adults. And I don't know to what extent you have some models that might speak to those issues that Ruth has raised.
You know, I think the one of the things I'm really excited about is the idea of being able to leverage near peers and be able to have them be part of that deeper learning experience. It helps with the belonging issue, but it also, by the way, helps with folks understanding their pathways. And I'm also a big believer in service learning. I think service learning is a powerful experience for a whole lot of different disciplines where folks have to kind of get those kind of interconnections. But the point you just made about personalization is a powerful one, and it's hard. In the world of education, people are so worried about scale, and they're so worried about, and one of the things we talk about all the time is, you know, high quality without scale is kind of boutique. It's wonderful, but it's not helping us on the national side. But scale without quality is a scam, right? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out how can we do the kinds of designs we're talking about in a way where we can help more and more diverse students be more successful than ever before. It's going to be hard work, but I think that personalization, if we can figure out ways of doing that and integrating that into our designs, we can help the students who are not that highly privileged right from high school student who is probably going to be fine in the traditional model because it was honed over 400 years just for them, right? Or at least 400 for all high schools were around, right? I think that we now have to think about how can we leverage the tools we have at our disposal to meet that, you know, that deployed soldier, that working student at who's working on their PhD while they're serving already in a corporation, that first generation low income student who has no background and actually needs to get their ABE before they get on their pathway. Those are all distinct, and we've got to figure out how we can use these tools differently to be able to kind of reach those needs. And I'm just really I think we infantilize learners far too much. I think if we can get data in front of them and the right kinds of apps designed the right way, the right resources in front of them, they can help tell us what's going to work and what's not, and actually kind of guide their learning. Kim, I know you feel passionately about this idea as well. It's this idea of trying to get them to captain their own ship, right?
I do, and I'd love to talk about, and this was an idea that I started at the Harvard Extension School with my Empowering Adult Online Learners class. We started a design lab that was part of the course, and each team came up with a learning problem to solve and worked together to design it and gave each other the feedback. So not only were they giving each other feedback, but they were also looking at things like quality matters and quality rubrics to see where that might begin and end. We took that idea and actually expanded on it and brought it into the WGU space, into this program where now people are designing and they're also getting that feedback from their peers around how does this land for you? And I think it's probably one of the more powerful parts of the experience.
Yeah, I've been around for a while. I'm not going to specify with data exactly how long. But I really feel that this is a unique opportunity in the present because the pandemic put an infrastructure into place for online learning that would have taken decades otherwise. That we've learned so much about experiential online learning as opposed to the step backward that MOOCs took into pushing teaching by telling and learning by listening. And we've got now these powerful machine learning systems that can take the big data that comes out of experiential online learning and really feed it back into a kind of customization and personalization that can be powerful. So we have the opportunity for the Renaissance after the Dark Ages, but we've got to be smart enough to take advantage of it.
Love it. I'm with you. Sign me up.
We not only MOOCs, but learning management systems in an age of learner-centered learning. We're trying to manage learners again with all these tools that the computer science folks in the world think we need to have. I was going to ask a question about personalization, Mark and Kim, but Chris has kind of already alluded to this. We're in the second half of the show already, believe it or not. We haven't addressed the second half of the show title, which is on personalized learning and competency-based assessment. So two-part question. Why is this the age of competency-based assessment and personalized learning? And Mark, you've been, you're at National University right now as president and CEO, and they've got something I think called precision-based learning and just-in-time supports. Can you describe it further? What does that all entail?
Oh, good. I'm going to let Kim go first because she's currently working at probably one of the leading universities in the world for competency-based education. Then I'll jump in and talk a bit about some of our stuff.
Yeah, so WGU is really focused on wrapping around the learners so that they can go as fast or as they can pace as they need to. And our model is such that you can sign up for a 6-month term and it's all you can eat, for that 6-month term. And so our assessment structure is focused on, did you achieve competency? So it's all based on skills. When we design a program, we are essentially looking at competencies and what are the skills that are needed to be able to achieve those competencies. And we tie them to employer needs. So that's really important because we're looking at the access and attainment, and that attainment piece is really, really important for our learners to turn around and have that return on investment on their time and also certainly on their finances. So from that perspective, this is WGU's world. And I know Mark National is very, very similar that way, especially with you at the helm.
Well, especially with the one-on-one model, especially for our graduate education, is very similar to Western Governors University. But just to kind of take a deep breath on this one, Kurt, I think Chris talked about the moment post-pandemic. The pandemic was incredibly hard on so many people. When I was at WGU, while I'm here at National, we lost students, we lost faculty, we lost family and friends. But even through all those processes, some things happen that probably in the long run will help these universities be better. And part of it is just the realization that we could do teaching and learning differently, right? Where we can actually try things and we can innovate pretty quickly. One of the things that happened all across the country was the beginning embrace of mastery-based learning, competency-based learning. And what happened is people said, we just can't do the grade thing right now because we have to reinvent the learning for the moment around the pandemic. And it started some conversations that were long needed. Because unfortunately, in the world of higher education, people think that grades have been around for thousands of years. And it just kind of kills me. It's like we invented grades out of the Industrial Revolution to help sort students. And the biggest challenge when you actually talk to students, grades have caused more trauma and challenge in the world of higher education because they're imprecise and they're unevenly leveraged, and people don't really know what they mean. And we end up having faculty being point counters as opposed to being learning managers, and it's just painful. And the best way I've heard it phrased is Marty Baker Stein used to talk about this idea that grades cause a blame and shame cycle, where basically the students either blame themselves, or they feel shame, or they blame the faculty member and they try to shame them, right? And the blame and shame cycle is just terrible. I like mastery-based learning, and people have found the real power of mastery-based learning, competency-based learning, because it actually creates a grace and challenge cycle. And that's what was exposed during the pandemic, is the grace and challenge cycle tells a student, okay, you didn't get it this time, grace, but here are the resources that can help you further master this, and let's go after it again. Because that's how we would do learning in any other kind of context, is grace and challenge. And what I think people in higher education are figuring out is, hey, there's real good stuff in that we could start leveraging at scale in a different way. So if you go to mastery.org, that's the home of the Mastery Transcript Consortium, you're going to see 400 schools, public schools and independent schools, that have been embracing mastery-based transcripting. And there's now 25 universities that are taking mastery transcripts as opposed to graded transcripts. And what they're finding is it's profound, because it takes the ceiling effect off the grades. For the high ability students, grades are a nightmare because you can't differentiate them, right? And then for the low achieving students, they're a nightmare because they put them on this track where if they don't learn it by this time, you never give them the ability to kind of try again and try again. And we're seeing now in places like National University where we're challenging ourselves to say, can we redesign this with mastery in mind and have different conversations about assessment, where we're trying to find authentic assessment. And Chris, I know you've been talking about authentic assessment for decades. This idea of let's have them do things and in real time assess whether or not they've mastered competencies, as opposed to having them take tests, right? And these high stakes assessments that don't really do anything for you professionally. The question is, can you in real time, while you're doing something, demonstrate that you've mastered concepts and show me as that's pulled together? That's going to be more powerful. And to me, the future of assessment in higher education is authentic, in practice assessment. And that is far more challenging than all the stuff we've been doing. We've created the testing industrial complex over the last century in this country. And I think now we're going to be, I think, if we have the right people involved in this, we're going to be in the kind of authentic assessment and a tool set, which is going to help us personalize learning. It's going to help us guide learning. And it's a moment to get really excited. And if we can get more people out of Kim's program that are thinking that way, we're going to be in good shape.
So Mark, does this relate to our conversation where you were talking about the new possibility, not the new normal? And can you explain to our audience out there, we got people listening live and in YouTube, what the new possibility means to you?
Yeah, I think Kurt, we were talking about this. It's this idea that post-pandemic, the natural reaction after that trauma for a lot of people is, hey, I just want to go back to normal. For the love of God, can we please just go back to normal? The challenge is normal wasn't working for a whole lot of students. And we were already trying to challenge normal. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, new normal is not enough. New normal for some, like, hey, we're going to do what we're already doing at night, or we're going to do it online. That's not enough. What we need to begin to do is rethink all the elements at our disposal and start thinking about a new possible. And I love the new possible as a frame, because I stole it, by the way, from Hans Rosling. Hans Rosling passed away recently, but he was an international good troublemaker who did work on global hunger, on nuclear winter, on a whole host of things. If you Google Hans Rosling, you're going to see some of the most amazing data visualizations you've ever seen in your life. But his phrase in the book, Factfulness, he says, don't call me an optimist. That makes me sound unrealistic. Call me a possibilist. Possibilist is somebody who looks at the data and looks at the need and says, there is a path to get there. It's going to be hard, but here's the crawl, walk, run to get there. And we're going to do the work together to get there. I think that's where we are in the world of education. I'm ever the idealist around this. And, Chris, Kurt, Young, we've been at this for decades. And I got to say, I still remember the early days of my career was convincing people that the internet was a thing, right? That they actually were going to use the internet, right? And to where we are now, if I had told you we were going to be able to shut the entire country down and be able to continue most of the learning enterprises in this country because we had this giant internet infrastructure that would allow us all to do online synchronous and asynchronous learning. If I had said that in 1995, 1996, people would have said, you're out of your mind, right? But that's how far we've come. And so I think we're at this new possible moment. You can tell I'm a little passionate about this. I think it's going to be exciting. Kim, I know you've been really kind of like trying to make this the theme of your program, and a lot of your teaching has been around this idea of like, this is the work that we have at hand, right?
Well, before Kim jumps in, I just add that online collaboration is the thing and was the thing prior to the World Wide Web. There were people doing online collaboration just in internet-based in the late 80s and actually from the mid 80s. They were doing async courses from the University of Toronto and other places. And we were studying online collaboration in 1990 with tools like Aspects and Conference Writer and all these wonderful things that were there.
National University was founded in 71 by a Navy captain, Dr. David Chigos, who went on to lead all the learning and development for General Dynamics, one of the biggest defense contractors in the country. And he got furious that his courses being taught at UC San Diego Extension weren't getting transcripted. They didn't count. He said, this is nuts. So he wanted to create something different for adult learners. And I bring that up because he said 16 weeks, 5 classes at a time don't make any sense for a deployed soldier. Let's just do it 1 month at a time and do one course at a time. And it was all about changing cognitive load for those people, which is great. But the new cutting edge technology they began to use along the way was this really killer thing called the cassette tape. Which allowed you to do asynchronous learning, right? And again, that was, and then go fast forward to now where we are using augmented reality and virtual reality to teach nurses to get ready to help the COVID pandemic. I mean, that's where we have now more tools and technology at our disposal. The question is, can we put them on purpose? Can we redesign this learning and can we reinvent assessment to make learning a more, again, take that next generation education and wrap it in a whole human frame, aiming it at value, and some really good stuff can come out. That's the new possibility.
So this is actually a wonderful time to jump in, because I want to take you guys to go beyond. I remember the time when Western Governors was founded. I don't remember when National University was founded. And I think what you guys are talking about is something quite amazing, because right now, if you look at K-12 schools, technology can do a lot more. I remember Kurt Bunk, 1994, I came to your conference. I was a graduate student at Illinois. We're just playing with the website, we're teaching HTML. Remember, we're just running stuff. We're counting how many websites there are. So today, nobody talks about that. Everybody's on the web. But if you go to schools, especially some traditional schools, students are actually not even on the web. There are many countries, many schools, they're banning the use of smartphones. So I've always been looking at, you have to create new alternatives. So I think Western Governors and National University, we're new. We're to replace, we're to advance, we're to change. I saw a lot of comments here with Jared Fosso, one of our great teachers in British Columbia, kept talking about what's worth teaching, what's useful. You got textbooks, and Chris was coming, you got the textbook publishers, assessment publishers. I think the other one is that you mentioned WTC, the Mastery Transcript Consortium, is again trying to create an alternative. Not all alternatives work, but some will work. So I want you, Kim and actually Mark, just to imagine what new possibilities. Actually, we had a show which, Mark, again, you helped create, the Global Online Academy. I think it's great. I think actually every student should go to Global Online Academy. Why don't you go to your local school? So we don't have a lot of time. Just use your imagination. Give us some guidance. Give our audience something. What could you create? What would be viable? And if you want to get rid of NU right now, or the Western Governors, what new things could we create? That would be actually something to imagine, with consideration of ChatGPT and whatever, ChatGPT 3 or 4 or DALL-E, all the new AI popping up.
Mark, I'll jump in with something that we've been talking about for a little bit over the last few weeks. And that's, I have a dream of that there's a personalized learning experience for everyone, and that removes unnecessary friction of learning and allows learners to focus on the struggle of learning that helps them transform. So with AI, and this is why, Chris, I'm going to be looking very closely at your work, how might we build designs, platforms, and processes that are proactive, that can course correct before the learner even knows they need course correction, so that it's completely intuitive. And I go back to thinking about some advances that we've seen, with Amazon and the recommender engine. That's a very small it's a great tool that we all appreciate when you go onto Amazon, that something's recommended to you, but we can go so far beyond that in learning. And so anyway, that's my dream, is that someday one of my grandkids will log on to a learning environment that knows them and knows how they need to learn, and presents things in a way that is removing that unnecessary friction. Again, I think Mark made a great point. We're not trying to create the country club. What we're trying to do is create that opportunity to learn. So anyway, Mark, I'm going to toss it to you.
I'm going to use a Navy example because National University was founded by a Navy captain, right? And I'm a Navy brat. And I'm going to tell a story on my dad. My dad was taught electronics in the Navy. He was a Navy chief. And he used to talk about, like, when the technology really works, nobody notices it. Right. He would talk about the light switch. Like I said, people really understood the technology that goes in that to centrally generating electricity and distributing it over an entire grid and getting it to people's houses and transforming it so it doesn't blow the house up, and then allowing you to kind of turn your switch and have your lights come on. Like, the technology behind that is ridiculous. And nobody appreciates it or understands it. And of course, he taught electronics, so of course he was pretty passionate about it. But his line always stuck with me, and other people have said something similar, which is, when technology really works, it disappears. And I wrote an article a few years ago called "Please God, Make It Go Away." It was all about the prayers of technology, and it was this idea of, can we get a learning infrastructure in place where we're not talking about the technology that powers it? We're actually just able to have immersive, personalized learning in a way where people are able to go in. That's why I'm really excited about augmented reality and virtual reality possibilities, along with the AI engines driving it, along with the ability to kind of create these personal connections where people can connect with people. I say for a long time, our job should be to have technology help make human moments precious, right? Where we can have people connecting with people. But it's going to happen. We are going to have holographic classrooms where students are able to sit next to other people from all around the world with teachers. We are able to have just-in-time VR demonstrations and interactive kind of connections, around that, really fascinating. The kind of two-dimensional cartoon internet we're talking about right now is going to go away. It's going to be a little bit before that all kind of comes to bear, but I'm really excited about what this is probably going to be for my kids and grandkids. And what we want to do is put the pieces in place where more kind of holistic, human-centered, whole human-centered, authentic assessment is at the core. Learning is guiding the process, and it's not being driven by efficiency and the ability for us to count and administer. It's literally being driven by the learning enterprise, which we will figure out. We're going to get a lot better learning outcomes when we let learning lead the way, as opposed to efficiency kind of lead the way. So I'm really excited by, what's at our fingertips right now with AR and VR and AI. If we do it the right way, if we can get ourselves to the point where we're not always talking about the technology, we're actually using it for the learning, right? The idea that's actually making the learning shine, that's when it's going to be exciting. So the big answer to your question is, when it disappears, I'll be happy.
Well, I think I just have a quick follow-up on both of you guys. With the personalization of learning, there's one big question it's a big elephant there. I think we ask the question, we can personalize your speed, when you learn, how much you learn, competency, the process of learning, I call that. But the outcome of learning is often not allowed to be personalized, right? Like in higher education, I understand, when you get a major, like, Kim, you're preparing a teacher should know this thing. But in K-12, I think with the ChatGPT and all the AI tools, you have to follow the student, at least partially, right? You may have to have like 1/3 of the curriculum about citizenship. Okay, I agree. But what about the 70%? So when you design any learning, personalized learning, you have to follow each individual student. When Kim, you're talking about your grandchildren, you know, our children, we all have, you know, grandchildren whenever they come. So how do they get to choose what to learn? I think when you have AR, VR online or not, you know, so that's kind of an interesting negotiation between the teachers and designers. And I don't think right now any school, or maybe Kim, your school, allows students to choose to study. I choose to study this.
No, I used to chair the board of a Montessori school, and I still think like Maria Montessori with the right technology would be the ultimate technology person. She would like if we could do like experiential hands-on learning at scale, you know, leveraging technology, she would have been thrilled, right? And that's kind of where that comes in, where a student can do their independent learning and really kind of, you know, go after it. That's when it's really going to take off. I think, you know, that combination of maybe AR, VR, AI, and Montessori, right? That's kind of where it kind of comes together.
I think some of this is recognizing where the low-hanging fruit is and where the high-hanging fruit is. And all of the emphasis on what AI can do standalone is very misplaced and very high-hanging fruit.
Yes.
But the idea that, and this institute that I'm involved with is centrally working on this, the idea that with the right kind of AI-based assistant, an adequate educator can become a good educator, and a good educator can become a great educator. And so you're increasing the talent pool. The two sigma is in the teaching.
Yes.
The quality and learning, the quality of the educational experiences that the skilled human being can provide. That's the potential breakthrough that's low hanging. But as you say, it involves not focusing on the technology as some kind of a secret magic sauce, but instead recognizing it's empowering people with the technology that's invisible that makes the big difference.
And so if you haven't been to the blog post on this session, I recommend you go to it, because there's a link to the article that spurred me to invite our guests today. Some of you are familiar with Evolution. The Evolution in Canada, spelled with 3 L's, had a wonderful article back in December, the 19th of December, A Time for Learning Experience Designers. I highly recommend getting this and wrapping your head around what Kim and Mark have been saying for the last hour. But there's one quote in it on page 3 that I put in the blog post. So if you just go to the blog post, you'll read that. And it talks about, you know, the advancements we've made over the past quarter century in competency-based education and personalized learning. And now we have a real commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also a real need for social and emotional learning, and maybe the use of advanced data analytics can help in that regard. As a final comment in here tonight, before I introduce the next show, just quick 30-second or 15 seconds each, do you either of you want to comment on that, what you were talking about there in terms of the types of things that are needed today in social emotional learning, or in your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and, you know, in how this plays out in the design of your instruction to help those who are disadvantaged or underprivileged or might be typically excluded from educational experiences? Just a quick comment on each.
Kim?
Sure. Well, it's a passion for me. There's neurodiversity in my family. We have navigated that journey. And one of the things that really resonates with me with WGU's mission is around pathways to opportunity that all students can learn. And so to me, learning experience design is the glue, it's the engine that will help get us there. And so I'm going to toss it to you, Mark, but that is my passion. That's what brings me to this work.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that's really powerful in the world of education is when you sit and talk with students about their experiences and they tell you the truth. And what you hear from a lot of students who have come from diverse backgrounds, low-income backgrounds, first-generation backgrounds, is they tell you the truth that they do not feel like they belong. They don't feel like they should be a part. They feel like somehow they're an imposter and someone's going to figure them out. I love being connected to institutions that are trying to change that, and they're trying to create access pathways for more and more diverse students to be more successful than ever before. And that's not just about helping them be successful, it's about welcoming them to the fold. It's about making sure they feel like they belong and making sure they can feel like they can add their voice into the mix and do their life's best work and help make a difference like the rest of them, right? And to me, that is work worth doing. And to all this talk about technology and tools and policy and practice, it is to what end? And the to what end is to help these students learn well, finish strong, and launch effectively, and hopefully change the world for the better.
Wonderful. And I want to thank our listening audience live in YouTube. Thank you for the questions, Edgar and Gerald. We didn't get to those. And thank Dante as well, sent me a side question, and anyone else who's in the live show there. I want to point out to next week's show. First of all, I want to thank Kim and Mark for taking time out here on a Saturday to join us from the East Coast and from the West Coast and wherever we are in between, like in Indiana here. It's been a wonderful show. It's been great. It's been something we should have done at, maybe in week 1 for this show. You would have been a great guest just starting us off, but it's great to have you here in the 3rd season. We are going to have another unique show next week. And you can pick up an article in Inside Higher Ed that came out a couple weeks ago, Reviving College Dreams of Afghan Women. The blog post will be going up later today. It's Liam Knox, January 24th. And he talks about the Asian University for Women and how they are working with young women who have come from Afghanistan. I'm one of the last flights out before the Taliban took over. And so we'll have 3 of those people in that program. We'll have the instructor in that program, Stephanie Pankey, a friend of mine, and we'll have the founder, Kamal Ahmad, founder of Asian University for Women and the Asian University or Women Support Foundation. So it makes for an interesting show. I'm sure it'll be lively, and it'll be a different time. We'll be at 11 a.m. Eastern time, 8 a.m. on the West Coast. So please join us. It'll be 10 o'clock at night in Bangladesh, and they're going to be coming from Bangladesh. So I hope you can join us next week.